Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. We've still got plenty to do on the Lowride pumpkin, so let's get cracking. Step 17, steering. Okay, we need quite a few bits for this one. There's A2, the drag link, A9 and A4, the crank arms, two A10s which clamp the whole assembly together, 4 of the small ball cups, and 2 of the big cups. For metal parts we have the 3 brass ball ends, 2 M3x12 grubs, 2 10mm self-tappers, 2 M3x15s, 2 M3x10 shoulder screws, 4 of the small bearings, and the long push rod. The crank arms are fitted to the drag link with the shoulder screws. They need to be done up just so they're bottomed out. In the outer holes of the drag link, 2 of the ball ends need to get fitted. The third goes in the end of the 90-degree crank for the steering push rod. The big holes in the cranks get a bearing in both sides, which leaves us with a nice little steering assembly. Pay attention to the diagram when you build it, it's all too easy to get it a bit wrong. Still, it's an easy fix, just make sure it's right before you try and fit it to the chassis. The clamps have a post on one end that fits through the bearings and lines up on the chassis. There's 2 holes, one at the front that gets a 10mm self-tapper, and the one at the back that goes through the post gets an M3x15. Tighten up all the screws and check to see the steering runs nicely with no binding. It should go end to end without catching. And now for everybody's favourite, building the linkage. There's 2 types. The short links are easy to put together. The 12mm grub can be installed with the same Allen key we use for the pinion. It wants to go in just under halfway. Then another ball cup goes on the end. There's enough grip on the first cup that we can just screw it on without having to grab the grub with some pliers. And as usual, Tamiya have some scale drawings of the linkages, so if it matches up, we're good to go. They just need clipping onto the balls on the outside of the drag link. A pair of pliers does the job quite nicely. One more bit to do. The long linkage needs the last 2 ball cups, 1 to go on each end. You can start them by hand, but they quickly become a bit stiff, so we'll need to use some pliers to grip the shaft. Just keep adjusting it until it matches up with the diagram. Now we can just clip it to the last of the ball ends, which leaves us with a very smooth steering setup. There's a lot less slop than most Tamiyas, but I reckon when we get the hubs on we'll still have the classic Tamiya wheel wobble. Okay, on to step 18, the front hubs. We'll be needing F7 and F8, 2 B11s, they're little spacers, A6 and A8, some little extension bits, not really sure what's going to attach to them. And we need F9 and F1. For metal parts, there's 2 M3x15s, 4 bearings, 2 of the silver ball ends, the ones with the longer threads, the 2 brass ball nuts, 2 stub axles, 4 kingpins, and 2 body clips. First job, grab the ball end and fit one of the spacers. Fit it to the underside of the hub as per the diagram. Remember the 2 hub assemblies are sided, so keep track of which you're building. Next, pop a bearing onto the stub axle and feed it through the hub. Press it in so it's starting to grab. Install the other bearing, which should hold the axle straight, and press the inside bearing in all the way using the cross wrench. To stop it falling apart until we fit the wheels, we need to fit a body clip where the drive pin will end up going. The next bit is a bit tricky. The extension part needs to get fitted to the top of the C-hub. Sounds simple enough. Tamiya want us to install one of the long screws all the way through the hub. Not impossible, but the amount of friction over the threads when you're most of the way through makes it rather difficult to do. A cap head and an Allen key would certainly help. You could grease the threads, but I'm not really a fan of that. Instead, I use an M3 tap to cut some threads into the plastic. It will still let us do the screw up nicely, but we won't be using anything that might attack the plastic, and we're not fighting against a seized up screw. As you can see, it goes in nice and freely, but there's enough thread that we can do it up nice and tight. Add to that the exposed end gets a ball nut fitted, it's really not going to go anywhere. Last bit, the kingpins need installing. Now it's important that these go in nice and straight so we don't end up binding the steering. It's a bit of a hack, but you can install the screw a turn or so with them a little bit wonky, then straighten them up before tightening them the rest of the way. When the hubs are complete, they should quite happily flop around under their own weight. If they're stiff, check to make sure everything's nice and straight. And of course we need 2 complete units, one for the left and one for the right. Step 19. We're going to attach the hubs. Okay, we don't need many bits this time, just 4 of the closed ball cups, 2 M3x18 threaded shafts or grubs, and 2 32mm screw pins. First we need to trim the ends off the ball cups. Because these links are going to be fairly short, we need to trim a couple of millimeters from the ends. The easiest method is to use a sharp knife and press very firmly. It's probably best to use a knife with a handle, but my fingers are well adapted to the abuse, so I can get away without. Trim all 4 and start building up the links. As usual, there's some diagrams in the manual. Build them to match. Next, line up the hub with the lower arm and install the screw pin. Just like the rest of them, they only need to be done up so they won't fall out. Just so the screw head's resting on the plastic. There's no need to go nuts. And of course, install the other hub too. This is a rear-wheel drive chassis, so there's no drive shaft to worry about here. It's just a case of snapping the links between the brass balls on the chassis and the ball nuts on the top of the hubs. Nice and simple. The last bit, we need to clip the steering linkages onto the silver balls. A pair of pliers helps a lot here too. And there we go, one rather nice set of push rods and cranks. They should be completely free to move end to end. If there's any binding at all, find it now and fix it. Okay, step 20. The last step for today, as it ties the front together nicely, and it's going to be the end of bag B. We need E7, which surprisingly is the front shock tower, B2, the front plate, and for screws we're going to need 5 10mm self-tappers. It's extra important you neatly trim all the little nubs that held the tower to its tree, or it won't quite fit properly. A few passes with a knife does the trick. The tower slides into a recess on the top plate and is attached by 2 screws. They're a bit awkward to get at, and there's not much to stop the tower twisting if you're doing up the screws, so keep a good grip on it as you're doing them up. Next, the plate fits over the steering assembly, which is why you need to make sure it's all working nicely before this step. Once it's on, it's going to be a pain to take it all apart again. The last 3 screws go in now, 2 at the back and 1 at the front and centre. There's still a couple more holes at the front. They get used when the front bumper gets fitted later. And well, there we go then, we're getting there. There's not much left to do to get it rolling now. Very nice. Right, I do believe this video will be live on the 25th. So, Merry Christmas, or whatever's appropriate for you, perhaps just Happy Sunday. I've uploaded another little video that's scheduled to go up a bit after this one. It's got full-size tanks and planes in, so hopefully that will make up for all the shorter videos. Maybe. Anyway, thanks for watching, like if you liked, comment if you have something to say, and if you're not already, why not subscribe? Bye guys!